Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this edition of Our Town. My guest this evening is Mark Gold, a member of the Select Board in Longmeadow. Welcome.
Good evening.
Mark is the Vice Chair of the Longmeadow Select Board, one of 5 members of our Select Board. And the reason we're speaking this evening is to discuss issues related to the town, and particularly issues related to the annual town meeting, which is May 7th, not too far away from the time we're doing this taping. And it's always the interest of Longmeadow Cable TV and myself to try to encourage people to come to the town meeting, and hopefully by doing this kind of dialogue, preparing people a little bit mentally and giving them a little tutorial on what they might expect at the town meeting. So first of all, how is the town doing?
Town's doing great, actually. When you look all around, we've got we're in really good shape. I think we're in good shape financially. We're going through this year quite well. We've had a couple of unfortunate deaths to our town community this past year of employees, both at the adult center and our Parks and Recreation Department, which we really feel terribly about. But we've now certainly got a new director of the adult center, Emily Perkins, and she's doing really well. We obviously have a new town manager, Stephen Crane. He's been on board just a couple of weeks as we speak here. He's doing wonderfully, getting his feet firmly planted on the ground. And I think we're well positioned to continue Longmeadow the way it is.
And you have a new veterans agent?
We have a new veterans agent as well. So, So, as I said, I think the Longmeadow's in good hands, and I think they've got, for people who are interested in the character and the nature and the neighborhoods that Longmeadow has always been, it still is that way.
So you're not. Some years when we enter this time of the year in the town meeting, we don't have enough money, and we're going to cut programs.
We never have enough money, but there's always more things we could do, clearly, and specifically in the last year, the Select Board's been focusing a lot on capital needs. Ideally, streets, sidewalks, and storm sewer outfalls, water, drinkable water, and sewers, like flushing sewers. Those are handled through water and sewer, and those are handled as the need arises. But
they have a special fund.
Through special funds and bond. But streets, storm sewers, and sidewalks are in fact some things that we have not been able financially to keep up with what's going on in town, and so we're trying to make an added commitment to that. It's interesting that I'm reading that the State House in Massachusetts, who by the way contributes to the town approximately $450,000 a year. It's called Chapter 90 funds.
Right, and that's Article something.
Those funds are used annually to help us pave roads and sidewalks, but it's never enough. I mean, when you have 100 miles of roads as we do, many of them that have pretty heavy trucks going on them, Route 5, Converse Street, Dwight Road, those kinds of things, that it's not enough. So we're trying to focus on how do we maintain the roads the way they need to be, and so we're putting a little bit more focus on that. But truly, our operating budget, which is the things that pay the salaries of our employees, which is much of what we do, and pays to provide most of the service to the town, is in pretty good shape. And I just like to make a quick comment. And a lot of that is due to our employees. The employees have really stepped up in town. I mean, we've had some contractual benefits over the last few years when times were tough. The employees recognized the times were tough and took less than what they might have otherwise wanted for raises. But we're doing well. I mean, people who lived in town for a while remember that 8 years ago we went out and passed the Prop 2.5 override, said we need this and it'll last 3 years. Well, that 3-year override has now lasted 8 years, and I'm not making any predictions. I hope it lasts 9 or 10 or 11, but it's done well.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about the town meeting.
Sure.
I did talk a little bit with Michael Clark earlier about this, the fact that it's going to be in the new high school gymnasium, where we I've tried to encourage people, if they're seeing this now for the first time, that this is the parking is distant from the location, so you might have to walk, wear comfortable shoes, come a little early so you can find a parking space, follow the signs to get to the gymnasium. I think that's fair.
Absolutely.
Fair to say. So how are you feeling about that, logistics of that?
It is what it is. I mean, the gymnasium remains the only place in town where we can have a meeting for hopefully the numbers of people who come. I think it's appropriate. We knew going back 3 years ago when the schedule for the high school was built that there'd be a transition period this year. But the gym is available, it is open. We don't have that many fewer parking spaces than the past. The problem is they're a little bit further away. You've got to park in the student parking lot and walk around.
Right, or by the tennis courts and walk over, but whatever it is. So residents have received, everybody should have received a copy of the warrant in a reminder.
There's plenty more at Town Hall if you haven't.
Perfect. And this is a document that is designed to, be your primer for the town meeting. It's got information from the Finance Committee. It's got pie charts and all kinds of spreadsheets about budgets 2 years back, going forward, and it's got what we're going to talk about a little bit here, the warrant. The warrant is the script for the town meeting, and each article on the warrant has been put here either by petition or by the select board, and they deal with mostly either money, zoning, or bylaw changes. That's essentially what the town meeting does, and many of these would be passed by majority vote. Some of them need a 2/3 vote. And the meeting, by the way, does start at 7 o'clock on the 7th at the high school. So in general, do you predict this to be a smooth, what do you think about what's going to happen?
I hope it will be a smooth town meeting. I am aware that there's some controversy about the overall town budget relative to the general government side of the budget, but not so much that as to the school side of the budget. The school committee requested more funds than the select board originally allocated to the school committee. And for people at home who don't know how the system works, and I'm not sure anybody knows how the system really works, but the school committee has autonomy for spending the money within their budget, but the town can provide them with the amount of money that they can then
school committee can move anything they want above their bottom line, but the town sets the bottom line.
Town sets the bottom line.
So, but the schools do get, in fairness, according to these pie charts, well over 50%,
60+%
of the total 57 million-ish budget that we're talking about.
Right.
That's fair?
It's a little just under 65%, and it's been like that for a while. I think the people in Longmeadow know that and recognize it. It's high, certainly relative to surrounding communities, but that's the nature of a town of Longmeadow, I think. So.
Right. Now, so the way the budget process works is we have a finance committee, we have a town manager, we have a select board, and we have a school committee. Those are the big players kind of in the budget process. And by charter, the town manager designs the budget with the input from the select board, but it's the town manager's budget that goes to the town meeting.
Well, yes,
usually.
to a large extent.
Usually.
The process this year, because we were in transition with town managers, is the select board developed what we called guidelines, and it was actually last October. So it was a long time ago. Yeah. And Paul Pasterzik at the time was our acting town manager. That's even before Barry Del Castillo came in as our acting town manager.
Right.
And he sent out a memo to all the departments. That's DPW and Adult Center and schools and everybody, and said the request of the select board is to come in with a budget of level funding with any increases above last year's, with a justification for statement for why you believe you need money above last year's level funds. The select board chose that approach so that we could see any additional monies and what it needed to be for, and potentially use up to the 2.5% levy limit increase that we're allowed by law to help in the capital projects, as I mentioned earlier.
Because that was your goal.
And in addition, we were also aware that it might be nice to maybe not use the whole 2.5% if at all possible, because we knew the taxes were going up pretty substantially because of the 2.5 exclusion of the bonding for the new high school.
So the highest point of our bond
Right.
commitment is this tax year.
Correct. And so,
This tax year.
for people who have last year saw an average of 6.4, 6.5% increase in taxes, we were hoping that this year, we could a little bit mitigate it. But the collection, and the collection of those issues of, can you hold down taxes at all? Can you reserve some funds for capital? And let's see what the justification is for any increases, led to that budget directive.
Right.
And so, during the transition, then Barry Del Castillo, who was our acting town manager at the time, came back to the select board with 2 budgets. His first budget was, here's the budget you asked for. Okay. However, column C is the budget I want to propose, which does have increases, and I'm going to justify, or at least give you my justifications for those increases.
Did those include the school?
No, they
Those
did
was
not.
the general government side.
At the time, the schools had not completed their budget.
Okay.
That he did that. It was literally there was an open space for the schools.
Right.
The general government side, and the increases in the general government side included things like some additional costs for unemployment, some additional costs for benefits. There were at one point the fire chief had asked for a deputy chief, things like that that they had asked for. And then the discussions within the select board ensued, as they say, and those discussions came down to something in between the select board's initial.
It's called compromise.
Right, in between the select board's original, don't come up with any increases or level funding, and what the town manager wanted. For example, lost in the process was the deputy chief, fire chief, but gained in the process were some other application. Toward the end of that process, the schools then submitted their budget proposal, which had a proposal of about 700 and if my numbers are correct, about $750,000, a little bit more than that, more than last year. And their proposal was based on increases of over $1 million and reductions. So their $750,000 increase was really a net of
Right.
new monies plus
savings.
some savings. And the discussions that came out of that were, well, what are the justifications? And they gave us their justifications, and there was some debate amongst the select board and between the select board and the school committee on how to best proceed. And I can cut to the chase here.
I think you should. Yeah, it's good. No, this is great.
That we went to the select board empowered our chair, Mr. Santinello, to sit down with Michael Clark, the chair of the school committee, to see if there was a compromise that could be reached. Something between the select boards, it ought to be level funded, and the school committee, $750,000. Prior to that, I had kind of reached out to Jim DeRosier, who's the member of the school committee finance subcommittee, to try to both ask him what might be possible and just get a sense from him if there was funds. And because the school committee is autonomous, the select board really doesn't get a chance to say, this line item's the one you ought to cut, and this line item's that. So, and nor do I want to, because I've got problems on the general government side.
Sure.
So, but we went, but in my discussions with Jim DeRosier, there were some generalizations that we discussed. And so when the select board set up this compromise team, Michael Clark asked Jim DeRosier if he would accompany him, and Paul Santinello asked me if I would accompany Paul. And we also had in the room the accountants, Paul Pisturzik from the town side and an assistant superintendent, Tom Mazza. So we had the right people in the room, and we went back and looked at what we wanted to do. And so the bottom line was the school said that they thought that they could reduce their increase, if you will, from a $750,000 increase to a $326,000 increase, or $353,000 increase.
That's about half.
Yeah, about half. And some of the processes by which they were doing that are things that Jim DeRosier and I came up with during our earlier discussions, and other methods were things that they came up with. But the problem was that by the time that compromise came up, the warrant already went out to print. So there.
You can amend the warrant at the time.
And you can amend the warrant. And so the question was, and we knew that. So, going onto the town meeting floor, we would have, if a compromise was reached, we'd have to amend the warrant, and we were prepared to do that. But for a variety of reasons, that when that compromise came back to the select board did not have a majority of votes to support that compromise agreement. And so the warrant remains as it is. However, the school committee, is my understanding, will still be looking to increase their funding to
they will
$353,000 above what's printed in the warrant.
So they will offer an amendment.
So they will be offering an amendment on town meeting floor.
Right.
One of the complexities is that in order to maintain a balanced budget, there are actually 3 involved articles. Now, my understanding is you've interviewed Mr. Clark, and he's gone through that. We can do it again if you want to, but we don't need to. But there are 3 warrant articles, and the way this works is that tax money that's raised from property taxes, is spent using a phrase called raise and appropriate. So we also have other sources of income. We have fees, like dog licenses, like other things. But we also have bonding, where you actually go out and borrow the money. So you have to really look at the critical item here is raise and appropriate. Money from property taxes cannot go up by more than 2.5% without an override.
Right.
And so we had spent that money or proposed to appropriate that money in 3 different articles.
Right.
The school committee is looking to increase it in one article, and therefore they need to decrease it an equivalent amount in the other 2 articles.
Right.
So they'll be, I presume, and I've been led to believe, proposing a series of 3 amendments to 3 separate articles, 6, 8, and 9, which will then put us back in balance if they all pass, and if all their amendments pass, and result in the schools getting this compromised amount of additional funds.
So is this very cumbersome?
I don't think it's cumbersome at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I mean,
So
it may take a little bit to explain to people what's going on,
Right.
as it did just now, but
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
cumbersome.
Yeah, okay. So you're comfortable with,
I'm comfortable with the I mean, I've said it. I said it early on, and I'll say it again. If there's disagreements going to the town meeting, there's confusion within the leadership of the town. Really doesn't have a great sense going forward to the people in town meeting. And so I'd have preferred that if we could have handled it beforehand.
Yeah.
We couldn't, and so we're going to do it this way. Hopefully that there isn't a lot of animosity, but it becomes more of a straightforward system.
yeah, good. So I noticed, we'll get into this a little bit more, but the October storm of, was it 2011?
Very well.
We're still paying that off. Is that the first couple? There's 2 articles early on, 4 and 5, that are pretty big ticket items, if I'm reading them correctly, over $300,000.
Correct, and to pay off. So the storm cost of cleanup was just a tad under $12 million.
Wow.
Okay, ton of money.
Yeah.
We have received to date very close to $9 million. In fact, we got another $900,000 check from FEMA through this. It passes through the hands of the state.
Okay,
they don't take any money.
This
just
is only
very recently.
$7.3 million.
But the problem was that FEMA didn't pay the money to the vendor. FEMA said, you pay the vendor and we'll pay you back. So we didn't happen to have $12 million sitting in our checking account. So we had to borrow the money to pay the vendor. As FEMA pays us back, we're obviously paying back the money we borrowed, but there are interest rates, and there's still a small amount of money left to be paid from FEMA. Okay. So part of this money is the interest on the money we borrowed, okay, which we're paying off. FEMA's come through with all the money, and we think and then some, but I shouldn't say that too loudly. But there is the town's share. And so our decision was that not paying for the town share in one fell swoop, but rather pay it off over a series of years. So the two different articles you see here, one's for interest on the money we borrowed, which we're going to get paid back, and the other is a portion of the town's share.
We don't get back the interest we borrowed to pay off?
No,
so
unfortunately
we have to
we
pay
don't.
all that,
Right.
yeah, okay. So that's, wow. Well, we'll be done with that at some point?
In a brief period of time. As I said, we've gotten
much of it.
money back from the federal government
Okay.
quite good.
So 6 is the big budget item, over $57 million now. What big corporation we're running here, and then we get into capital.
Right.
It's that to me is very confusing the way you did the capital on this thing. But that's it's
Well, if I can, I'd like
Yeah.
to say a couple things about it.
Yeah.
The town every year for at least 12 to 15 years now has dedicated 2% of real estate revenue, that's the money our residents pay in their real estate taxes, to capital. It goes into a fund called our Capital Stabilization Fund.
Yeah. Not every town has that, but we set that up
Right.
some 15
and,
years ago.
and we define in our process what capital is. Greater than $10,000,
Can
a
last.
shelf life of more than 10 years, on and on. So we know what capital is. And every year when we approve projects, sometimes you think you know what it's going to cost, but you're not quite sure. The problem you have in government is that if you appropriate $120,000 and the project costs $121,000, you can't do it because you can't just find more money. Mm-hmm. So we err on the side of let's appropriate $125,000 for that $121,000 project, or the project we think is $120,000, so we cover ourselves. The money we don't spend goes back into the fund, so it's not wasted, and it's not a spend it or lose it. So at the end of every year, we have money left in that capital stabilization fund, primarily money that's been returned from projects that were completed and underspent.
But then that gets applied to the next year?
Correct.
Sure.
But that's considered a bucket, okay? The other bucket is the new 2% we're going to be putting in.
Right, okay.
Okay? So that's really called raise and appropriate because it's coming from taxes. It's raise and appropriate, and it's passing through the capital stabilization fund.
Right.
Okay. Then because of the nature of some of these projects, we also have some enterprise funds, water enterprise fund and sewer enterprise fund, that can pay for these capital projects. So what we tried to lay out here is some of these items are being paid for out of the residual money that was in the capital stabilization fund. Some is being paid for by the new money coming in as raise and appropriate, and some is coming in and being paid for out of our enterprise funds. And there are a couple of items here where we're taking a little money from each of the pockets.
Now that you say that.
And
so it's
that's
raise and appropriate, it's capital stabilization, it's water retained, sewer retained, and then transfer from other items.
Right.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
it is a little bit complicated the way it's laid out, but it is a legal requirement so we can get the money out of the right pocket, if you will.
Okay, so there is
and they're great projects. They've been reviewed by a capital planning commission, capital planning committee. If you just look at them, every year we put money into a reserve fund for a fire engine. We recognize that the cost of fire engines has gone up in the 10 years we've been doing this, so we're putting a little bit more money this year. We're not buying a fire engine, but the nice thing is that when we do buy a fire engine, we're not going to go to the town and say we got to bond it. We've been putting money, kind of like you do at home, put a little bit of money aside every year. So we've got that. We've got some snow plows we've got to do, but we've also done what we really said capital is going to be for. We've supplemented that state funds. We're getting Chapter 90.
Which is Article 10,
which is $450,000.
$450,000, right.
With some money from our capital fund so we can do some more roads and a few more sidewalks and a few more.
You've doubled it. You've more than doubled it.
Right. And the reason we have is because even that only does a couple of miles of roads. Roads are very expensive. Sidewalks, I think we were told, are $100 a foot. So when when you're talking about $280,000, you're just doing a couple less than a half a mile of sidewalks, 2,800.
Yeah, and the funny thing about sidewalks is they never match. So it's kind of a funny thing.
That's another thing.
It's a kind of funny thing.
But there are areas of town where the sidewalks are offset that really need
trees, roots.
Right.
Okay, but people are going to be voting on the expenditure of a lot of money.
A lot of money, and people ought to know what they're voting for.
Right. So we get by capital, which is bottom line is $1,030,000. 3.
Correct. That's what it is.
And then you get into some other big public work types project. There's about $1 million, Article 9 for the drainage on
$955,000
about
for
$1 million.
Woodside,
Williams and
Merriweather.
Merriweather. We
Correct.
talked a little bit about that with the school with Michael Clark in terms of
Yep.
changing that, but that's a big project. Then there's water issues, but that money comes out of the water retained earnings
Correct.
account.
And
11.
just so people hear,
Yeah.
it does get reflected in water rates.
Right.
However, we have a program in water rates that is one bond kind of winds down, the others kick in. Although I'm not ready to make absolute promises, we expect that our water and sewer rates for next year will be quite steady, may even go down a tweak, but certainly won't be going up substantially as a result of these.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's been pretty good planning, and Paul Pasturzik gets a lot of credit for it.
And then you've got the pumping station that seems to need to be
Well, you know,
fixed or repaired.
that's our sewer pumping station on Emerson Road. So
Oh, okay.
there is one place in town where everybody's sewers go to, and then
before
it gets
over to Bondy's Island.
pumped to Bonnie. We really, really, really don't want that pump to
fail.
And so this actually replaces the generator and upgrades the pump. During our October storm, that generator ran for 8 days. And we were like this for 8 days, hoping that it
October
would...
2011.
11 storm. So you know, it's pretty critical.
That's Article 12. So 13 is another pumping station.
Right, that's the water pumping station.
Okay.
Okay, so there's the sewer pumping station on Emerson, but our water pumping station. So, you know, the water that comes in from Springfield goes all through Forest Glen Road. There's that concrete bunker there. We pump it from there, and to add pressure for people, but it also actually helps us fill our water tower. People don't know we actually use that, fill it up at night, and then it gives us water pressure. So there are issues with that water pumping station that need to be improved.
It's not just fluoride, though.
It has almost nothing to do with fluoride.
Oh, okay. I thought I read in the paper that it has something to do with fluoride.
No, this has to do with the
That's
control
where we
system.
add the fluoride.
It is where we add the fluoride,
But
these funds have to do with OSHA requirements that have changed since we have people. This is a concrete building that only has one entry and exit. It doesn't have an emergency eye wash station in it, and you know, for things that are chemicals that are used in there, it doesn't have other things. It's a very sensible thing to do. It's our drinking water. It's something we want to make sure that keeps going. So.
Yeah, good, because so I had some misinformation.
Yeah.
So the next big one is the $500,000 is to replace sewer lines on Laurel. So this is just an ongoing. We have a tremendous infrastructure issue with sewer and water lines, and so you're just sort of attacking this as you can.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that this kind of provides double duty for us a little bit, because the sewer line here is under the road. So this road needs to be, for anybody who's driven on Laurel Street between Converse and Williams, excuse me, it's in tough shape. The sewers are in tough shape too, and we know because we put cameras down them now. There's offsets in the piping and that kind of stuff. And so we're actually going to dig up the road, replace the sewers, and repave it. So we make sure that we're not digging up good roads to replace the sewers. Then again, at the time we replace the sewers, we're also upgrading the road. So it's really a double duty, and that all comes out of that $500,000 cost.
Then we get into a bunch of articles. 16 through 22 is community preservation stuff. Any comment?
No, community preservation is a separate fund and it's generally intended to do things that we haven't been able to do through with operating budgets. It's reviewed by. It's an application process reviewed by the Community Preservation Committee, and I think that they've got a pretty good list of items here.
And the thing the town meeting voters should know is that though the Community Preservation Committee recommends these articles, the town meeting has the right to decrease the amount, or vote it down. They don't have the authority to add to any article or amend the use of the money for that article. So
and in the past, community preservation funds have been used for things like preserving historical documents in town, and at this point we've also used it to replace the windows in the community house.
And the town hall.
And town hall.
Yeah.
So we've done some great things.
Handicapped work and the different things. And then we get into the bunch of zoning bylaw changes, which I don't necessarily understand all of these.
And unfortunately, I will tell you that I'm not as well versed. These are
Yeah.
pretty technically oriented. Our zoning committee and our planning committee have gone through these.
Do you understand the medical marijuana one?
Yeah, I do. It's Article
28.
28. That was something that was recommended to us at a municipal association meeting, and many cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth are doing that. What it does is it provides for a temporary moratorium on the placement of medical marijuana treatment centers until such time as the state can develop the criteria and guidelines, and the town can develop zoning criteria and guidelines. Again, this was, it's pretty much right out of the book of their recommendations. We think it's a good idea so that when we go into this, we actually know what we're doing. So. And
we did something. That's so temporary.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it says. It's a temporary moratorium.
That's great. And then Article 29 is the stretch energy code.
Yep, that initially came to the select board through a citizen's petition, but the select board has endorsed the article. It would allow the town, or it would mandate the town, to adopt the stretch energy code. The stretch energy code, among doing great things for people's homes in terms of their energy conservation.
And saving them money.
Also makes the town, is the first step toward making the town eligible to be a green community.
Actually, it's not the first step. In our case, it'll be the last step.
Well, yeah, and that's because we already passed the zoning law for renewable energy.
I mean,
we already did.
There are several steps.
Right, we'd already done a lot of those things.
I think you've done everything except this. This is the last step. So what's the big deal about being a green community?
Well, the Commonwealth puts aside money for green communities. It's not unlike 10 years ago or 8 years ago, the Community Preservation Act. But what it is really first in it's better to be first in than last in, because the last guy in is just diluting the pool. The first one in will get the most money. We have a ton of things that we could spend the state's money on.
Like what?
Well, in fact, we've got a couple of proposals that we've been looking at for the last couple of years. I was a proponent of a solar photovoltaic plant in town on town land, and I'm not certain that we were able to do that because of or in fact we weren't able to do that because of some economics that weren't quite favorable. But the economics may have turned around. But clearly, if we wanted to put solar panels on one of our middle schools, for example, which is a totally different project, this would help pay for it entirely.
Right.
We've been talking for several years about buying our street lights. We rent them now from Western Mass Electric. But certainly this would provide funds for helping us do that, which would provide.
If you were to change the bulb to be more energy efficient.
And change the bulbs to be more, but it would provide a means of, if you will, using capital to provide us a permanent reduction in our expenses.
Right, and the tennis court lights.
Right.
This would qualify as tennis court. So the last one is an old favorite.
The last one is an old favorite. Is a citizen's petition on fluoridation of the water. As most people who have been residents in town for a while know, that this came up very often, fairly frequently. It finally went to a referendum.
It did go to referendum.
It did go to referendum. It was defeated in a referendum. It looks like it took a hiatus for a year or two, and it's back.
Yep.
Clearly, residents have the right to put a petition up. I personally am opposed to it, and I've stated that publicly. I hope that, given the nature of a 30 article, some contentious items on the warrant, that people will stay around to vote one way or the other on Article 30.
Yep.
And that would then close our town meeting.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent job. Well, a lot of work goes into this, and I'm encouraging the residents certainly to come out to participate in this meeting. This is the climax of a lot of work of all the town departments, and sets the agenda for the next 12 months. I mean, this is the budget, the zoning. It defines what the town can do for the next 12 months. So it's really important that citizens participate in this, so that a balanced decision can be made by the town.
Absolutely. I mean, the best thing we can do is have hundreds or thousands of people at our town meeting, and then we know we've really got citizens participation.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you very much for the work you put into this, and for all the efforts, all your work on the select board. And to our residents who are listening, again, May 7th, 7 o'clock at the new gymnasium at the new Longmeadow High School is when the town meeting will occur. We encourage you to come early, wear comfortable shoes, and participate in your local government. Thank you for joining us, and good night.